How you doing, folks? Welcome to another fantastic episode of Real Spaghetti. I'm Johnny Gemstone.
And I'm Eddie Spagetty.
And have we got an episode for you? Because today we're going to be talking about what we consider to be the best and worst of 1986. And I'm going to be honest with you, there were a lot of movies that came out in 1986. Like a lot of really good movies came out in 1986. So for me, trying to make up this list of what I would consider to be the best was actually very difficult. I don't know about you.
Same deal. Ton of good movies came out in 1986. It was very hard to pick one. My first choice for the best one probably would have been Aliens, but that's not what it was.
I loved Aliens.
Yes.
Oddly enough, I did also not pick Aliens. But it was just so hard to choose, so we just kind of just grabbed whatever we could.
Had to go with something.
I think the worst of 1986 was a lot easier to pick because they had very fewer bad movies of the year.
True.
1986 had less shitty movies.
Yeah. But it was very hard to choose. A ton of good movies, so there are some that you'll think, oh, why didn't you pick that one? Well, yeah, we had to go with one. So here it is.
That's what we did. So I decided to go with, for my pick of the worst of 1986, is none other than the great Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck is the story of a young humanoid duck by the name of Howard who lives on the planet Duck World. And he ends up getting sucked into a portal and sent to the planet Earth, where he soon befriends a young rock star played by Leah Thompson, as well as a nerdy scientist played by a young Tim Robbins, as the two try to help a wayward Howard return to his home planet. And personally, I remember this movie being worse when I was a kid. Like, I gave it a rewatch recently, and it wasn't near as bad as I remember it being, but it was still pretty cheesy. And there were way too many duck puns in this movie. Not to mention the awkward sexual tension between Leah Thompson's character and Howard, which was kind of weird and borderline bestiality. However, it does have the distinction of being the very first Marvel Studios live-action Marvel film, which is not really a good movie to put your best foot forward with. They could have done better with that.
For their first one, I kind of wonder why they chose
the very first Marvel film, and it's Howard the Duck.
Probably one of the hardest ones to pull off, too. And it's just a weird idea to begin with. Your main character is a guy in a duck suit. You're going to follow him around through the whole movie. Mm-hmm. You're going to make this stand alone as a movie, too. Plus, they play it off as a kid's movie.
Yeah, G. There was a lot of
first 5 minutes, duck tits.
Yeah.
How many... I just picture, like, angry parents grabbing their kids in the first 5 minutes. We're not watching this. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it was cheap, it was corny.
Before you even see it, people are already telling you this is a bad movie, so you go into it thinking this is going to suck anyway.
But all in all, it wasn't as bad as Garbage Pail Kids, so I have to give it that. So I guess all in all, I'd probably give Howard the Duck 2 out of 5 stars.
That's fair.
That's what I go
That's nice
with.
For Howard the Duck.
I think that's being generous. 2 out of 5 stars.
It does get more hate than it deserves.
Yeah.
It's not the worst.
It's not the worst, but it's not good.
No.
At all.
Yeah, all in all, for Howard the Duck, having not seen it in such a long time too, like 20, 30 years, I might have saw it 2 or 3 times. And I was told then it's a stupid bad movie. You're gonna hate it. And I agreed it was kind of, dumb, unnecessary, and the fact that they probably spent a ton of money making that. Just the duck suit alone probably cost half the budget right there. And there was no way it was gonna make its money back. It's just weird too. Duck planet, like that whole beginning scene with the whole duck planet, it's exactly like Earth, only it's duck shit.
And like their money still looks like American money. It just has a duck on it.
They evolved the same way we did. Had the same
just a lot of duck puns.
Just weird, and the duck puns, and then sexual innuendo with the Leah Thompson. I did like Leah Thompson in it though. It just sort of reminded me like if Gem in the Holograms was
yeah. She's got that '80s punk walk.
Yeah, she pulled off that whole '80s look. So, like her hairdo, I remember that part of it. But I feel like they put a lot of hard work into it. It wasn't like cheaply made.
Yeah, they tried to make a good movie, but it just didn't really rise to the occasion.
I feel like it falls in the same area as Masters of the Universe did.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
How it kind of has that same feel too. But in the end, I was a little counter to it and gave it 3 stars because it still wasn't as bad as I remember it seeming.
Yeah, it seems very generous.
Which should move me on to my worst movie now.
Alrighty, and your bad 86 film?
My bad worst movie of 1986, and again, there are a lot of bad movies in 1986, but as a Charles Bronson fan, there's one I just had to put in there and had to mention, and that's Golden Globus's Murphy's Law. Ooh. Yes. Now, the movie itself is not a bad movie. It's a pretty generic 80s Charles Bronson action movie, which is fine. Even the plot, which is, again, not bad. It's entertaining enough. I don't think a movie to compare it to, quality-wise. Death Wish 4, which wasn't the worst Death Wish, but it was getting bad. So it's like that same level. Only it's even worse. I'd rather see Death Wish 4 again than this one, because one character can ruin an entire movie. And it's just not so much the character, but a badly written character who you could have avoided completely. So here it is. Here's a quick plot to Murphy's Law. Charles Bronson is a cop, and is this woman who he put in jail years ago, who gets out of jail and goes on this rampage of revenge trying to kill him. And first she wants to frame him, so she frames him for the murder of his ex-wife and her boyfriend, and he gets locked up in jail and handcuffed to the most obnoxious woman in the world. Mostly because, first of all, she doesn't need to be here. And they give her these one-liners every 2 minutes of the movie. She has to insult Charles Bronson's character and give him some dumb nickname. I don't know, just anything that comes... Something you could think up right now, like booger face, snot nose. And a lot of them are like gay and lesbian related too.
Yeah. Like
gay-bo, fag, maybe even that. I probably couldn't say that now. There's even one point in the movie where she's trying to seduce a guard. I don't know if you remember this part. Like I'm supposed to believe this character could seduce somebody. Mm-hmm. And at one point, she's actually hitting on Charles Bronson, who I'm assuming is much older than she is.
Well, she pretty much hits on him through the whole movie, really.
Yeah. And I think that Charles Bronson can actually do better than her.
Oh, yeah, he definitely could. He's Charles Bronson.
Basically, the whole movie is he's going around trying to prove his innocence, that he didn't actually kill his wife, while this crazy lady is trying to kill him. And along the way, she's killing everybody that is related to this, her going to prison. Like the judge, she killed him in like the, I don't know, was it the sauna or something like that.
So basically her whole law-abiding citizen thing.
Yeah. Only she was actually the criminal.
She was actually guilty.
Yeah, she was actually crazy. Okay, she even killed her she even killed her own social worker who had nothing to do with any of that. It all comes down to a big showdown in the apartment where it all happened, I guess. And of course the annoying lady's there. For no reason, you don't need her. And they even make you think she gets killed at one point, only she's in the ambulance at the end and she's still alive. But it's just your generic Charles Bronson movie. Of course, in the end, he kills her, or like the cops are trying to kill him too. There's crooked cops trying to kill Charles Bronson just because they don't like him.
How could you not like Charles Bronson?
Yeah. So I don't hate the movie. I just hate the fact that they ruined a pretty generic but good Charles Bronson movie with one shitty character. But in the end, that is all I have to say about that crappy movie. Not the worst Charles Bronson movie. What else came out that year? Family of Cops. Any of the Family of Cops. But still, probably, in my opinion, one of the worst movies of 1986, thanks to one badly written character. Not a total shit fest, so my stars for this one are 2. 2 simple stars.
2 stars. It's not the worst rating for a movie, but
Charles Bronson
Worthy.
gets all those stars.
for me personally, I didn't particularly hate this film. I just thought it was your basic paint-by-numbers generic 80s action film with Charles Bronson.
All he was doing.
Yeah, it was just Charles Bronson being Bronson. It was just fine. I mean, who doesn't love that? But yeah, I do agree that pretty much the worst part of this movie was definitely the lady who was tagging along with him. She was very obnoxious and had a shitty attitude, and she just really did not do anything for the film.
Those one-liners.
Yeah, really shitty
Seriously,
one-liners.
stuff through the entire movie.
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty rough going through, but basically the rest of the film was just, fairly decent,
Watchable.
watchable. And I really don't blame this either because I have
Yeah.
seen Kathleen
Not her
Wheeler
fault.
in other things, And
Quantum
she's
Leap.
usually pretty solid, like that one particular episode of Quantum Leap that we
that's
see
the
her in.
first thing that
She was
comes to
really good in
mind.
that.
Can't blame her
yeah, I
for a
don't blame
shitty
her.
written character.
It's the shitty writing, the lazy writing. For my stars, I would give it 2 out of 5.
That's the
I
same
think that's
as I do.
fair.
It is
You know,
a 2-star movie. Charles Bronson deserves
Yeah.
at least 2 stars for that. The plot was fine.
Plot was thin, but it's serviceable.
Generic.
Yeah.
Predictable, but yeah.
But all in all, a plotting, forgettable, somewhat
Yeah.
predictable film that just served as another paycheck for Charles Bronson.
Yeah. One of his worst, but yes. So now we can talk about the best of 1986.
Ooh,
Which, like we said, was really hard to pick.
it really was.
Man.
I actually just had to grab one off the top of my head because I really couldn't choose. I mean,
Yeah.
like seriously, look up how many movies came out in 1986 and
Yeah.
how many of those are friggin' amazing.
Especially if you were growing up in that time period.
Yeah.
You'll appreciate him a lot more and see it from the eyes of a child, too, I think. Because those are pretty much the ones we went with. Family-friendly ones. The whole
Yeah.
family could enjoy.
This is more of the more lighthearted appeal of that time period.
All right. Well, you started off.
Well, for my 1986 good movie, I chose Short Circuit. Short Circuit tells the story of a plucky robot who gets zapped by lightning and soon becomes self-aware. And after he escapes the laboratory where he was created, he soon befriends a local food truck driver, played by Ali Sheedy, as well as a nerdy scientist, played by a young Steve Guttenberg. And the two try to help this robot escape capture from a militant group that works for the lab. And me personally, I absolutely love this film. It was funny, it was heartwarming, it was lighthearted. Incredibly entertaining film with an equally entertaining sequel. I consider Short Circuit to be absolutely a must-see film, and I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic.
I agree. I can't disagree on this one. I almost wanted to choose it myself. That and part 2, which I think the sequel is equally as good.
I
as
really
the-
enjoyed
as
the
the
sequel
first
as
one.
well. I thought it was equally as fun. But yeah,
And the score, I love the score to this
great
movie.
music.
Like, even the soundtrack, it's the regular music they use in it, plus the score, I forget who wrote it.
I have no
Off the
idea.
top of your head, but yeah. Plus, unlike Howard the Duck, the main character is a robot, not a human.
Yeah.
And they actually pull it off. We actually enjoy and like. And I even love freaking Johnny Five, where you're upset
Yeah.
when he gets. You think he's dead in the
You think
end.
they kill off Johnny Five and you're literally
Yeah.
heartbroken over a robot.
I'm feeling emotional for this. I want to cry that a robot is dead. And there's that joke that I always remember with the grass.
Oh
in the
yeah.
glove compartment that I didn't understand as a kid.
Yeah, it
So
took you a while to
what,
understand
grass
that
in the
joke,
glove
but-
compartment. Now I look at it now, it's like, why did these two old people that were smoking weed?
Oh, they're old.
Yeah. Their glaucoma is probably.
Yeah. The joints are acting up.
Plus, you notice it has G.W. Bailey is in this, pretty much playing the same
He
character
was.
he was in
Police Academy.
with Steve Guttenberg.
Him and Guttenberg were
Yeah.
like this in the 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, you really couldn't help but root for Johnny Five
Yeah.
through the whole thing.
You're actually convinced he
was
is alive.
Very,
too.
very charming
Yeah.
for a robot.
You love Johnny Five. I actually was a little nicer and gave it 4.5.
4.5.
I thought
That's
it was
almost
one
a
of my
perfect
most
score.
memorable movies, yeah.
I agree. I can definitely go with that.
And like I said, same as part 2.
Yeah, I do.
It's one of those few movies where the sequel's like almost
That's true.
just as good.
Just like Aliens.
Yeah, like Aliens. Which moves me to mine. The best movie of 1986, in my opinion. Again, hard to choose. But I saw this movie so many times, the VHS tape we watched it on, wore out and snapped one day. And that was Flight of the Navigator, the Disney movie Flight of the
Wow.
Navigator.
I mean, I can understand that tape breaking. That was a fantastic
Yeah.
kids film.
Watched it again and again and again. That's when the whole family could watch and actually sit down and everybody actually liked it. So we
I remember we actually watched that in school back in the day.
Yeah, so so anybody can watch it. And I'll run you through the quick plot in case you haven't seen it.
In any case, you should.
This kid, David Freeman is his name, he's abducted by a UFO that returns him to his home 8 years later by accident. He was supposed to return him the second he left as an experiment so they could, see what human beings were like on his home planet. Spaceship is actually just a drone ship that flies around the universe collecting species samples, testing them, and then returning them back to their home planet. So it was like they never left. But like he said, because of some accident that happened, he returned him 8 years after and not in his own time. It's too dangerous to return a human to his own time. So he gets to his house and he's still the same age, but his whole family is now 8 years older. So of course scientists are baffled by this. They throw him in a laboratory. Howard Hessman is the laboratory guy, and that's where he gets to meet Sarah Jessica Parker, who's also in this movie in a very early role, way before she even did. What is she even famous for?
Square Pegs.
Square Pegs and Sex in the City. I don't know. Plus, it involves time travel, which is really what got me into it in the first place. Back to the Future had come out like a year before that, so anything that involved time travel, I was so into seeing it. Even Bigelow's Adventures in Time, which came out the same year too. Again, it's hard to not choose that one.
Yeah.
But no one's ever even friggin' heard of that.
Sadly.
Sadly, yes. So anyway, the UFO wants David Freeman's brain information because all the star charts that he needs to get his ship back home are in David Freeman's brain. So he puts him on the ship, agrees to take him home back to his own time, gets the star charts, only it changes his personality totally into Pee Wee Herman for some reason. And it's the voice of Pee Wee Herman from that point on. So it becomes like a whole adventure of this kid trying to get back to his own time period, and Pee Wee Herman is the spaceship, so, and he gets to fly it. He's the navigator because all the star charts are in his head. And that's the whole movie. He does get back to his own time, of course. Which means the movie technically doesn't happen, only he did get to keep one of the alien species as a pet. So in the end, he can't prove it happened. I don't know I kind of wonder what happens to that.
He could prove it, but then he'd have a whole bunch of government assholes.
Again, yeah, Howard Hessman from 8 years prior would be on his ass.
Yeah.
And that time
Where'd you get this alien pet?
This little weird alien thing.
So, but he's already telling his brother, and his brother's not going to keep his mouth shut. He's going to go around. Everybody's going to find out about his little alien pet.
And then, my big question in the end, watching it as an adult, was once this ship gets back to its home planet, and now it has the personality of Pee Wee Herman. And they're like a sophisticated species that made it with no personality really. Are they just gonna wipe its memory clean, or are they gonna keep it as Pee Wee Herman?
Maybe they'll have it destroyed.
Yeah, or that too. It's just what the hell? It's ruined now. Yeah. This kid's mind ruined
this kid just turned our ship into a Pee Wee Herman.
And they're annoyed by it probably. They don't get human.
They don't get the jokes.
Yeah. But in the end, this was such a good and memorable movie to me that I gave it the full 5 stars. To me, this is a Disney classic that I'll never forget. I could tell you the whole story right now, scene for scene, but there's no point in doing that. Just watch the movie. It's on Disney Plus. Yeah.
That is a hell of a score, and I almost agree with you. Because to me, Flight of the Navigator is the quintessential 80s family movie. I mean, we pretty much grew up on these films. I mean, we had the Goonies, we had Gremlins, the previously mentioned Short Circuit films. We grew up on those. So, I mean, all in all, things would have been a lot different if Flight of the Navigator never existed, and I'm glad it did. I'm pretty sure at one point in time, every 80s kid dreamed about flying around in their own personal spaceship. That was a pretty neat concept. Yeah. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I think all in all, it's a pretty solid film, and I would give it 4 out of 5. Not a perfect score, but I'm trying to be courteous here.
Close enough.
Yeah. Decent flick. Go check it out.
Highly recommended. Flight of the Navigator.
And a little interesting fact, the kid who played David Scott Freeman in the film would actually go on to rob a bank in Canada.
This is very true.
And he got caught and arrested because his career went nowhere.
Yep.
It's a shame.
Trying to raise money for Flight of the Navigator 2, Origins.
He wanted to get the funding for that sequel. Yep. Disney said no, so he was going to do it on his own. Robs a Canadian bank. All for
Canada, of all places, yeah. Another great soundtrack, too. Gotta point out. Alan Silvestri, I believe, did this one. Classic. And the soundtrack and the score. It's one of those where what was it? The Beach Boys. Round, round, get around.
I get around.
And there was a few others. All around, a classic. It's been over what? 20 years, 30 years?
30 years almost. Yeah. Almost 30 years. And these films still hold up today somehow.
Even the bad ones hold up as not great, but still memorable in some way.
Except maybe Rat Boy. But
Rat Boy,
yes,
Rat Boy. That also came out in 1986.
That would have been my worst, but I already did a whole video on Rat Boy,
Yeah.
and I really don't want to go through the pain of that again.
That's true. I'd rather watch Howard the Duck than Rat Boy.
Howard the Duck was way better than I remember it being.
Oh yeah, I thought
It was still shit, but I remember it being way worse.
Yeah, it was just not a good idea. No.
Well, anyway, folks, that's our best and worst of 1986.
Yes.
I'd be curious to know what you consider to be your best and worst of that year.
Yeah, I'm sure we're wrong in your opinion or not. Maybe you agree.
Maybe you loved Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
Maybe you thought Murphy's Law was the greatest movie since sliced bread.
Yeah, some people might. Yeah, a lot of Charles Bronson fans out there might.
But that's our opinion.
And we welcome yours. But yeah.
So until next time, folks, toodaloo.
Adios for now, folks. Boom.